Sage 300 tips and tricks. I just have a bunch of random ideas here that sort of poured out of my head in no particular order. So I'm just going to jump in and go through those. If there's anything I've touched on that isn't clear or you maybe want to see a little more of, please just raise your hand. And I've sort of looked at it from the point of view of, again, typical questions that we get quite often. So I will run through those. So a question that often happens is, can I see who's in Sage? Or, it says I'm out of licenses, but, there's only 3 people here working and we have 5 licenses and it's not letting me in. So how do I see who's logged into Sage 300? So that's available from the help menu. Current users will show you who is logged in. Okay. There's been some changes to this screen. So if you are using web screens, you can now see who's logged into both the classic desktop screens and the web screens. Okay. There is an option to show what that user is currently doing, what screen they have open. So I don't have any screens launched, but if I did, then it would show that screen. And that can be helpful if you're trying to run a specific process that requires exclusive access, like a fiscal year end. It'll tell you someone's in that screen. You'll see it sometimes in payroll where it's saying, I can't calculate payroll right now because someone else is doing T4s or transaction history. So if you want to know who that is and what screen they have open, ticking that box will show you that. The other option you'll see in here is, again, relatively new. And I should mention that some of the things I'll be talking about are potentially new features that you may or may not have in your software. Yes? As far as I know, and I think I tested this the other night, that yes, you can see who is logged in. The only thing that you can't do, unless you're logged in as the admin user, is the sign out selected users, okay? Which is a relatively new thing that allows you to actually boot people out now, right? So the scenario is, I got to do my year-end close. Somebody forgot to log out of Sage. They just, locked their screen and went home for the day, but they left themselves logged into Sage 300. I don't know their password, right? And I can't wait till tomorrow. So that option does require the admin login. Even if, as a regular user, you've been given full rights to everything, you will not see that because there is no security option for that. It is an admin-only function. So keep that in mind. What it does do is it's designed fairly intelligently because obviously there's some danger in kicking somebody out when they're in the middle of doing something like posting a transaction. So it gives you a warning to say, hey, the best option is to call the person first and ask them nicely to get out. Use this as a last resort. But what it also does is it takes about 30 seconds or so for it to work, because what it tries to do is do some communication with that user's session to see, well, hey, is there a posting in progress? And it sort of tries to, as best it can, kick them out gracefully, right, without potentially corrupting your data or those sorts of things. Does anybody from BAS know the answer to that question for sure about whether you need to log as admin for that? I'm pretty sure you can see everything except the sign out users button if you're logged in as admin. Agree. We got an agreement from the course, so I'm confident. At the bottom of the screen there, you can see as well number of user licenses you have, how many are in use. And again, the Sage 300 licensing model is concurrent users, right? So if you have 20 user licenses, you could have 30 users set up, and they're just sharing those 20 user licenses on a first-come, first-served basis. The other thing that is new, you can see that on the right side of the screen, is a section for reserved. So this is nice, right? Where if you have, let's say, 10 users, you have maybe 5 licenses, and 3 of those are your hardcore finance users. You never want them to not have a license available to them. You can reserve 3 for those specific users. Those 3 will never be in the pool for everybody else to be accessed, and so effectively everyone else is sharing 2 user licenses, okay? So that is something you can set up in the user security, along with all the other settings in there about, restricting them to certain times and making them rotate their passwords and those sorts of things. There's a checkbox in there to say I want to reserve a LAN pack for this user. Okay, so a couple of the questions that go around this is, can I see what they're doing? Yes, I can see what screen they're in right now, but, can I see what they do all day? And prior to the last update, the answer was no. What they've added now is an optional switch that you can turn on if you want to log activity, okay? Now, this isn't full, complete logging throughout the system, but it is a log report that shows, Morgan logged in this morning at 8 o'clock, and then he opened the GL batch screen, and then he opened, the payroll employees screen, and then he closed that screen. So it's like a breadcrumb trail of, the user's activity through Sage. It doesn't tell you what they did when they were on that screen, but it will tell you what sorts of things they were doing while they were in Sage. Okay, so that is now included in the product as of I think, the last product update. The next logical question that people often ask is, I want to know who changed this pay rate on this employee, right? Or who changed, a setting on a vendor, or who changed the description on this GL account. I'm tired of people messing up my nice and tidy system, and I want to know who's wrist a slap. So that is not in the product, but there are a couple of very good third-party solutions that do that to varying extents. The Pacific Technology, the fellows are just outside the room here, they have a product called Audit Logger, which, depending on how much you want to track, can log pretty much anything in the database. So it will tell you somebody went to this employee record, they went to this earnings code, they changed the rate from, $20 an hour to $21 an hour on this date and this time, they logged in from this IP address. Full logging, okay? That is obviously something you don't want to turn on for the entire Sage application because there is some overhead to logging all of that extra data in an audit trail. So you want to be a little selective and strategic about it, but it can audit trail anything you want. So basically a full history of not just what is in the system now, but what was in the system 3 days ago, right? What did that data look like then? What did it get changed to, and who changed it? Okay. So the Pacific Technology solution will audit and show you the audit log. If you want controls over changing and you want to approve changes, the Orchid workflow solution will do that. Will allow you to, for example, say, I don't want a credit limit change on a customer unless my AR manager approves it first. And so what it'll allow you to do is pretty slick, again, without sort of customizing Sage. It allows you to just add these rules to really any field. So a user will log in to, say, the customer screen. They'll go to change the credit limit, and it'll pop up a message and say, okay, thank you. I get that you want to change this, but you are not allowed to change it. So I'm just going to keep that new credit limit off to the side, and I'll notify the person who's responsible for approving that. And once they approve that, then I'll come back and I'll change that to what you want it to be, assuming they approved it. Okay, so that is available, but again, not out of the box. It's a third-party product, quite a slick solution. And it works for master file changes, for posting batches, for all sorts of activities inside Sage 300. So if you want to add some workflow and controls, you can do that. Okay, so on the topic of controls, I mentioned this in my earlier session today briefly. When we talk about security, people often ask, what is it that I can control, right? And often we talk about the standard Sage security model is I can control sort of what screens people can get into, basically. Either they can access GL or not, right? Either they can post batches or not. They can maybe create batches, but they can't post them, right? We can restrict them to functions, but we generally can't restrict them to data, right? To certain kinds of data, but not other kinds of data. And so there are a few places where you can do that in Sage. And so the first area is general ledger accounts. You may not see this icon, account permissions, because you do need to turn it on to say that you want to use it, because there are some consequences to doing it. But once you turn it on, then you will have an account permissions icon. And what it allows you to do is to say, I want certain people to be able to access the entire GL, right, carte blanche, or these are department managers. I just want them to see their own department. I just want them to see the income statement accounts of their department, because that's all they're responsible for. If you have people doing data entry, I think I mentioned that this morning, I have a client that's recently done that, right? They're pushing data entry out, billing to office managers at remote sites. They're not accounting people, they're not bookkeepers. and the complaint is they're constantly picking the wrong account, they're picking accounts in other people's departments, right? So you can use it as a validation tool as well as just a privacy and control tool to say that I want to restrict a person to a certain set of GL accounts, okay? And the way this model works is when you turn it on, you make a decision to say, the default is that when I add a new user, they have access to all accounts unless I restrict them, or the default is that a new user has access to nothing until I give them access to accounts. So you have to decide which model you want, because obviously there's consequences, right? If you decide the second model and you set up a user and don't do the extra step, then I don't see any GL accounts, okay? And the other model has risks too, right? Because you can set up a new department head and forget to add the restrictions, they'll see everything, okay? So you just need to decide how you want that to work. And you can do that for accounts, ranges of accounts, by segment, right? So by division, region, cost center, department, whatever it is that you do, okay? So that is a nice feature, again, in larger environments where you're following that theme of what I was talking about earlier today of trying to put 100 out into the organization so more people are using it and not just your accountants, right? Push it out to other people. Let's really, leverage this software across the organization. So that is one area. The other area where you can do that is with payroll. So do we have any payroll, Sage 300 payroll users in the room? No? Okay, so I won't even bother to mention that. You do have payroll. Sure. Yep. The employee number. Yeah, so in the session just prior, I had mentioned just right at the very end, the number changer utilities. And maybe just as a background, Sage 300 uses this model where some systems, there'll be an invisible identifier behind the scenes. So you can change the code or the name and everything still works because that invisible identifier doesn't change. And so all the linkages and the relationships and the history, goes along with that. Sage 300 doesn't use that model. It shows you what the unique identifier is. It's a GL account, it's a vendor number, it's an item number, it's an employee number, right? And so what they give you to sort of handle that situation, and by the way, that makes reporting and customization, all those things easier because we don't need to reference these invisible identifiers. We know we link history to an employee based on the employee's number. It's very obvious, right? So there's an advantage to doing that. The disadvantage is you just can't open up the screen and change the number. You'll see when you do that on any Sage 300 screen, if I call up a vendor, an employee, whatever, and I change the number as soon as I want to add a new one, right? It's not changing that one. So I mentioned in the prior session that there are number changer utilities for general ledger accounts, for vendors, for customers, for inventory items, unfortunately not for payroll employees, but if that is if you have lots of employees and this is a big project, there is a nice little utility from, does anybody know? Bass has one, yes. There's a third-party one, and yes, I forgot Bass has one as well. So yes, it's possible. It's just another utility you need to run. And basically what it's doing is it's like a souped-up find and replace. So it's not only changing the vendor's employee profile, it's looking for all their history, changing that, EI history, everything, right? So not out of the box, unfortunately, but it is possible. In terms of payroll, you do have that option payroll as well. So if you want to segregate your payroll, if you have a junior payroll person and you don't want them to have access to senior management's and payroll, you can do the same sort of data restrictions in payroll and give partial employee access to certain users, okay? Beyond that, again, when you're going into this model of pushing Sage 300 out, you may want to do further restrictions. Norming has a great security suite to allow you to do those same restrictions to limit access to which banks employees can post to, which customers, which vendors, which inventory items they can use, which job cost contracts they can use. So you can really blow this out across the whole organization. They're very easy to deploy, they're affordable, and so if you need that sort of functionality, it is available as an add-on, okay, beyond GL accounts and payroll. So the answer to this is you as a user, hopefully you know what this means. If you don't, you need to ask someone with the admin account to log in. There's a screen that will show who it was, what screen they were on, what quite didn't finish. I will tell you that 99% of the time, it's an import that didn't finish, or it's printing checks that didn't finish correctly. That's like 99% of the cases of what this is, okay? So if you see that, that's what you should be thinking of, like, was I importing something? What this is it's a really nice feature of Sage 300, which just makes sure things finish properly. And then if you started something and it didn't finish, it's gonna keep track of that. If you're importing, 10,000, vendors or all sorts of history, and it stops halfway through, it's gonna keep track of that and pick up where it left off so you don't have to start the whole thing over again, okay? Same thing with, if it's halfway through, posting a transaction, you'll see some systems where they'll give special admin access to allow you to post a one-sided journal entry because the journal entry only half posted. That never happens with Sage 300 because of this, right? It makes sure stuff gets properly completed, and if not, it keeps track of it so it can pick up where it left off, okay? Global search. So again, this is relatively new-ish. And the idea here, one of the common complaints in Sage 300 is there's lots of menus, lots of icons. If I'm looking for something, how do I find it, right? I gotta figure out what screen I gotta go to or what report I have to run. I'm trying to find this particular transaction that has a certain invoice number, right? So this is sort of a response to that. It's like a Google-style kind of search, right? Where I can just type in an invoice number or a name, okay? And I can choose how much I want it to search. This is a pretty small data set, so I'm just gonna choose everything, okay? And then it'll come up with hits against that string, right? Across all of these areas. So it'll search master files for vendors, customers, GL accounts, inventory items, and then it'll search transaction detail at these various levels, okay? And you can choose what you want it to search for, okay? Yes? Yep, sorry, I did that quickly. So to access that, it's in the new ribbon, the new style ribbon. Again, if you're on an older version, it might not quite look like this, and you might not see the global search, okay? It's, anybody remember, it's 2018, 2019, okay, when they added global search, so maybe in 2019, I think, or later. Okay, and again, it is the little magnifying glass up there in the ribbon, okay? The other nice thing about those is those are clickable links, okay? So it will drill down, take you right to that screen. Okay? I think it's just within the context of that company. I don't think it goes across companies. And I think the reason there is that there's potentially security considerations of do you have access to one company and not another. So yeah, I don't think there's any global sort of system-wide search across multiple companies. Not 100% sure, but I think that's the case. It's restricted to the one you're logged into. That's a good question. Anyone know the answer to that? Okay. If you need, sorry? Yes. But perhaps? Yes. So that's what I was going to say. So if that is an important requirement for you, if you want to be able to search across multiple databases, there are other ways to do that, not in the product out of the box. There are other utilities or reports that we could design that would search across databases for you, if you need that sort of thing, if it's important. Anybody using these visual process flows? Okay, they're again, newish, not certainly in the last year or whatever, but we do have clients that are coming from 2016, 2017, 2018 and may not see some of these. I tend to really, forget about these and look over them. As a longtime Sage 300 user, I sort of know how to navigate with my eyes closed. But these are quite nice, especially for, again, maybe non-finance users, newer users. They're called visual process flows. And what they do is they kind of consolidate all the icons that might be in different nested folders onto a single screen. And what they'll do as well is maybe even add in icons from other modules as well. So, a common complaint is, I'm doing all my sales order stuff and some of the stuff doesn't update until I run day end. Well, that's an icon over in the inventory module. They add it right there on the end. They give you links to customer and item screen right there. So it's sort of a one-stop shopping. Okay, so it's a little bit more visually pleasant than the old folder and icon style. The other nice thing about these is that they are customizable. Okay, so if you want a custom flow, if you want to guide users through doing a certain set of steps, you can customize those icons. You can add links to a file to say, here's how we need to do this process. Here's how our billing process works. Here are the steps. You can put a link to that little Word document or a text file, embed it right in there. You can add even just tips like you see at the top right there, right on the screen. So just little tips and reminders can be added there. So it's a nice way to sort of modernize the interface as well. Finders, right? So they're those little magnifying glasses that you see everywhere in Sage 300. And they're often overlooked in terms of how powerful they are. The question that we often get is, especially for users that have come from something like QuickBooks, and they're used to just typing, right, and having like the autocomplete style find. Why can't I do that? This is a higher end product than my QuickBooks, and I can't do, autocomplete find. And the answer is you can't, because the whole searching has been designed a different way. And the idea with finders is that you might want to search for a customer based on, a city or a postal code or an area code or something, and the finders let you do that, right, to search many different ways. But if you want to replicate that sort of idea of quick, autocomplete type search, there's a way that you can sort of replicate that. And so what I'd recommend is within the Finder, there's this menu option called Global Settings. Okay, and there's an option there that says Go to Filter First. It's turned off by default. I recommend that you turn it on, because what that allows you to do is if you're tabbing through the screen, say you're a customer service person and you're taking orders all day and you gotta get them in there quick, it allows you on that field. Okay, I'm really a big fan of not using the mouse as much as possible. If you want to be efficient at doing data entry, keep your hands on the keyboard. It's the fastest way to do it. So make sure you know some of the shortcut keys in Sage. F5 is the most important one. F5 is what invokes the Finder. Okay, so hands on the keyboard, F5. I don't need to use my mouse to put the cursor in that field. I just start typing. Okay, so I set my preference to how do I normally search. I search by the customer's name. I want to do a contained search, so it doesn't matter if the word's in the middle or at the beginning. Okay, and again, once I invoke that Finder, F5, I just start typing, okay, and I can get pretty close to the same style of, autocomplete search, okay? And the idea here is that I would then just go tab and enter, okay? So just a couple of extra keystrokes to really get that same type of efficient searching. Okay, so that's global settings. The reason it's called global settings, go to filter first, is because that will apply to all finders on all screens. Okay, global settings, go to filter first. I talked about, well, let's talk about something else, right? So let's say I'm looking for a customer, right, to do an order, and I want to search by something that is not on this screen, but I know it's on the customer profile, right? The finders come pre-populated with a standard set, a reasonable number, about a dozen different search criteria that you can search by, okay? But it's not everything, okay? But you do have access to customize these finders, okay? Again, this is really powerful. So under the settings menu, I can select columns, okay? The ones on the right are the ones that are showing on the screen, predefined ones. The ones on the left is everything that's available to search by for, in this case, a customer. Okay, and you can see it's pretty much every field on the customer profile, including, by the way, if I go to the bottom, any optional fields that you've configured, right? These are all the optional fields, so I can search on those as well. Okay, they're all available. And so all you need to do is choose the one that you want to search by that's not included, highlight it, include to move over onto the right. That'll now be included in your list, okay? And if you want it, more visible without scrolling over to the right, then you can just highlight that and go up, 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 up until it's at the top. Okay, you can also do the same thing by dragging columns in the interface. Okay. The other thing about the finders is you can almost use them like inquiry tools or like mini reports, right? Ad hoc inquiries, because they're quite powerful that way. So in addition to just being able to pick which columns you want on there, you can drag and drop, right, to change the order. You can do, again, filters. So if I want just my customers that are in the retail group, okay, I basically just made a simple little report of customers, okay, right here on the screen, okay, good for ad hoc inquiries, okay, make your own little report without having to export or without having to design a custom report. It's not full-blown means, but in a pinch, it can do some neat things. So the other neat thing that you can do here is you can do complex searches, right? So instead of just searching on one thing, you can search on multiple things. So let's say I have a situation where I have a customer and they have a bunch of orders outstanding and something just changed. I need to go back and I need to edit all those orders. I need to put them on hold or something, right? And I have years of history, right, of sales orders in here. So what I can do, because this only lets me search one thing at a time, is I can use this set criteria button, and I can search on multiple things. So I can say, show me all of the customers. Okay, I'm gonna add that to my list. For my customer number 1400, I could search by, name as well if I wanted to. Okay, but I only want to see the active ones. Okay, so I don't want to see all the completed orders. Okay. So that's active. Inactive is actually another status for whether the order's been completed, but I'm just going to show that as an example. Okay. So that'll allow me to search on multiple criteria, but also what I can do with this, which is kind of neat, is I can save that. Okay. And when I save it, it means it's going to stick. Okay. That's actually not a good example. Because if I returned a list of, say, 6 orders, right, and I take my action on the first one, right, I go to put it on hold or add some comments, I don't want to do that search all over again, right? So by clicking the save button, the next time I go into the Finder, it's just those 6 orders, I go to the next one, right? And when I go in the Finder, I'll be on that same one. It's going to be the next one down. I progress to that one, do my thing, progress to the next one, and I've got a subset of the data that I'm working with, okay? The other place this is really useful is clients ask all the time, look, we go through 1 million vendors, right? 90% of them are inactive, but we can't get rid of them. We want to keep some history, right? But I don't want to see them every time I'm doing my data entry, my badge list. I want to see the active ones. So that's a good use for that as well, is you can set a Finder, a criteria for just active customers, active vendors, active GL accounts, whatever it may be. Hit that save button, and then go into that Finder, you will only see, again, that filtered list, okay? So the data is that it's easy to forget that you did that. And you're like, what happened to that GL account? Like, where the heck is it? And you forgot that 3 months ago. You set that filter, so just be aware if you're playing with that. There is no video on the screen that it's filtered, unfortunately. Some of the other tools show you a little indicator, but this does not. So if you think you got missing data, check that set criteria button, because there may be a filter in place, okay? Everything that I'm talking about here, by the way, all those preferences, columns, filters, everything, they are highly, highly customized by you as a user. So they're saved with your user ID. If I do that, I'm not messing up, Morgan's login, right? He can have his own settings. And they are by screen, they are by company, they are by Finder. Okay, so if I'm modifying the customer Finder on the order entry screen, it's not modifying the customer Finder on the customer screen. Okay, they're all independently saved. It's all stored with your login, with your preferences. Okay, I think I want to mention one more thing. I think we're heading over time here. So maybe just one more thing I'll mention, which is, again, another relatively new feature, newish feature, question that comes up quite often, which is I'm taking advantage of, the mass emailing capabilities in Sage 300. I'm, mass emailing out my customer invoices, my AR statements, but I want to send them to more than one person. Okay, so that's question number 1 that comes up. The workaround, right, is that you can put 2 email addresses in an email field if you separate them with a semicolon, right? Every email program interprets a semicolon as, a different email address. So that just gets passed to the, email sending, and it'll interpret that as 2 different email addresses and send it that way. That works. Problem is those fields are limited to 60 characters. So if you've got, like Dean S. Medeiros at, whatever, you're going to quickly run out. Okay, and the other thing that doesn't do is it doesn't allow you to say, I want to send invoices to Morgan, but I want to send statements to Jennifer, right? So what you can do now, and again, this is newish, help me out, 2020, something like that, okay, is what you now have a function called multiple contacts. And again, Sage generally does these things really well thought out. they didn't just add another field, right? They said, how can we really blow this out? And it is its own little module. So it's common to customers and to vendors. That means you can share a contact between multiple customers. You can share a contact between a customer and a vendor, right? So the contacts are independent of customers and vendors, okay? So that's one thing. That's their whole separate entity. But really what it translates to on these screens that you're used to seeing is when you turn it on, it does not break what you've been using. So it leaves the contact fields in place in case you have data in there. They didn't want to sort of rip that out and break the functionality, maybe third-party products are referring to that, whatever. So they leave that in place, but you now have a grid where you can define multiple contacts, okay? Those contacts, again, are complete separate entities. So if I say view contact details as an example, you'll see I have a full record, so I can keep track of if they have a separate address, not just separate email, address, phone number, notes. They have optional fields that you can attach, so you can do lots of cool things with this as well if you need to. But the main reason they exist is to, again, allow you to blast email documents to multiple people, right? So you're not limited by those 60 characters, number one. And you can see by the X's in the grid is you can send different documents to different contacts, okay? So it gives you that flexibility to send statements to one person, invoice to another, cash receipts to another, et cetera. Yes. So it is a module, like anything else in Sage. You need to activate it. So it's under the Administrative Services Data Activation. Okay. Yep. So depending on how comfortable you are with this, this may be something you do yourself. Typically, this is something people ask for help with. Multiple contacts is a pretty simple module, so certainly you can do that yourself. Other modules, we typically, ask you to reach out to us because there are setup considerations, right? Before you just turn it on and go hog wild, start using it. We'll tell you about what you need to watch out for and we'll plan the project. This is one that's pretty simple that you can turn on yourself, okay? So you'll see it, under data activation, and it'll be listed as one of the modules that you may have access to but haven't yet activated. Okay, it'll be listed there. There's multiple contacts. You're welcome. Thank you, yes. So that's the other reason that, again, we ask you to reach out because, again, you'll log in as admin, you'll turn that on, and then users will log in and they can't see it. And you'll say, I turned it on, I don't know why it's not showing up. There is security that goes with that, right? So, again, with Sage 300, it's not just a matter of turning something on. There's a little bit of planning that goes in. Again, this is a fairly simple module, but you should probably just reach out. That's not inside of 15 minutes, we'll probably help you turn it on and set it up and configure it. Okay, we're 5 minutes over, so I think I'll stop it there. Again, thank you very much for coming today, and thank you very much for all of the great questions. We love to have those questions, and I appreciate that. Thank you.